Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome back to another one of my Wild Bill's vlogs here, coming to you live from the race shop. Today's vlog is about track prep. Good. What's good racing? What ain't good racing? I guess that's the best way to put it. We'll see how this goes. Okay. I want to circle back real quick. I want to thank everybody that watches these vlogs, comments. I appreciate it. A lot of people commented on my last vlog over the weekend here. We saw them at the races. There we go. Better angle there. The vlog about being in the pits. Push truck drivers, track officials, people that, pit stewards, other racers, all kinds of stuff. A lot of positive feedback. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. I've had all kinds of suggestions too with other things I should have said, but sometimes these topics are endless. But if you didn't check it out, check out the last vlog about being in the pit area. So anyway, thank you to everybody that watched that vlog and stopped by and talked to me over the weekend. So, all right, track prep, or what makes good racing. Maybe that's a better way to talk about it. So we're just coming off a weekend where the Outlaws ran at I-55. Our local racing here everything got rained out with BAPS on Sunday. And it kind of leads me back a little bit I think it was last week. My brother made a post on Facebook about some track prep or track racing conditions that weren't that favorable. I thought about doing this last week, but then the pit vlog video kind of spoke to me a little more. But so here goes. If you're out there and you're watching the races, okay, and you often hear people talk about the racetrack, what makes good racing, or the track's too fast, or this, that, or next thing. So I'm going to try and break that down for you real quick and give you my thoughts on what the ideal track conditions may be, and this is going to vary a little bit. So 2 weeks ago, we raced at Williams Grove on a Friday night. It rained, and then Lincoln on a Saturday night, and the track was really, really wet, really, really heavy. A lot of moisture in the track, the rain from the night before, possibly the rain that day. And this is the same for pretty much every racetrack, right? So obviously if there's moisture, rain, or if there's moisture in the air, lots of humidity, so on and so forth, the racetrack, the surface itself, obviously the dirt is going to be moist and it will be wet. So let's talk about the really wet tracks. Let's talk about them first. Now, I feel as though that depending on the size and or shape of the track itself, can kind of dictate a little bit of whether a wet track is going to be good racing for that track. And I'll give you an example. Example of a wet track probably racing somewhat good would be a smaller track, okay? And, when I say smaller, maybe something that's not real fast, okay? So if you get a track that's kind of small and round and you can just run around there wide open, well, you have a wet track. You're just going to go as fast as you can. And it's hard to pass. And but anyway, if you had somewhat of a smaller track, maybe had, some straightaway to it, you could probably get away with a wetter surface, possibly all night long, and have better racing versus a bigger track or a faster track in general. So probably the best example of a wet, fast track, at least here in central Pennsylvania, would be Williams Grove, or let's just say Port Royal. And we've been there already where circumstances be what they are, it rains or what have you, the weather's not favorable, they race anyway. And next thing you know, everybody's just, they're running what we would like to call a dyno session. So basically, you just run the motor wide open for your 10-lap heat race, and what you got's what you got. Yes, there are some variables and setup that could change that a little bit, but the track surface being so wet and hooked up, a lot of traction and dirt, everybody's running around there wide open. So there's your wet track, okay? And then the other extreme would be a completely dry, slick track. No moisture at all, black slick, no top groove, just single groove. I would kind of put that in the daytime racing surface. We get that a couple of times a year here, where the track's hard for whatever reason, can't get the moisture in it, more or less becomes one lane around the bottom, and the racing's rather boring. So that's kind of the two extremes. All right, now that last one about the dry track, that can really be anywhere. Okay. All right, so now let's talk about what I feel as though makes good racing and what doesn't make good racing. I'm going to use our local tracks here for the most part, and then we're going to touch on I-55, which was over the weekend. So in my opinion, in central Pennsylvania, we have a lot of tracks with long straightaways, tight turns, or even semi-long straightaways and tight turns. So these tracks that are shaped like that, if your straightaways are wet, oversaturated, okay, let's forget about the turns. Let's talk about the straightaways. So you got drag strips. Basically, you got two drag strips, front stretch and a back stretch. And if you watch drag racing and HR drag racing, they hit the throttle when the light turns green and they go as fast as they can from point A to point B, and the race is over. Essentially, that's the same thing that we are doing every time we hit the racetrack. Now, if the straightaways are oversaturated, too much moisture, everybody can go as fast as you can down that straightaway, never spin a tire, and makes for a fast track, okay? And in turn, them fast straightaways, it makes your turn speed faster too, right? Because you're going faster down the straightaway. My hands are dirty. And you're just hooked up. You're so hooked up. So when you get to the turn, you're going so much faster. Makes it harder to pass, okay, when the straightaways are wet and fast, especially here in Pennsylvania. Like I said, long straightaways, tight turns. So if you could get it to the point where I'm going to say would be the ideal situation. Now, I'm in no means trying to criticize anybody out there that does track prep, because I've never done it. I'm just a racer. I'm giving my 2 cents on what I feel as though makes good track prep. Now, we just came off a weekend where we were in BAPS on Sunday night. And BAPS, generally speaking, now I don't know if it's because of the fact that a lot of times they race on Saturday night and then we race there on a Sunday, or if it's just the atmosphere, or if it's the if it's the actual the texture of the dirt, the clay they use. But generally speaking, BAPS gets dry and slick. Sometimes right out of the gate. Sometimes in hot laps, it's already blowing dust on the straightaways. Now the turns might have some character, what have you. So, in my opinion, the best racing surface for the racer, which in turn makes it better racing for the fans, is when the straightaways get dry. Number one, you got to have the straightaways where they're not so hooked up where everybody's going Mach 10 into the corner. Okay, so you take away some grip, take away some traction. You put a little more of it back into the setup of the car. Maybe even the driver has to maybe not even run full throttle, okay? If you can't hook the tires up, what's the point of mashing the throttle pedal to the floor? And we see that a lot of BAPS. I would say BAPS and Port Royal are probably the two most consistent tracks that have a slicked over surface. Now, I said straightaways to start out with. Wet straightaway, dry straightaway. So let's talk about the turns. And Port Royal probably races the best out of every track, black slick all the way across, because the track surface is wide. you can, most of the time the track gets clean, and I'll explain what that means. So when you hear a driver say, well, the track cleaned off and the track got wide. So what that means is when you got the dirt track, the surface gets dry. There's marbles on top of the surface. Well, when the track gets that hard and slick where there is no more marbles, it's just, the rubber on the track, but not taking rubber. I'm going to hit on that here in a minute. But the track gets black. So when it gets black and slick, that's some rubber off the tires getting on the surface. It just kind of gets slick. You don't have as much traction. Somewhat like racing on ice, if you could kind of put it that way. So Port Royal probably gets the best report card as far as racing on a black top to bottom track. There's usually a top groove somewhere there. Even if there isn't a top groove, you have the middle of the track, because the track's so wide. So Port Royal, black slick, straightaways and turns typically make for the best racing in Port Royal. BAPS, a lot of times what happens to BAPS is they'll come out, the track will be straightaways will be slick, corners will be slick to a point. Sometimes they get a little too slick. They actually come out and they'll do some track prep. They'll farm the track, water it, and the majority of the time that makes for great racing. Now, why is it different than, say, Port Royal? The shape of the track, the speed you're going. You're not going as fast. The straightaways are so slick at BAPS where you get a little bit of a second groove or even a third groove with some moisture up on the top of the track. Makes for really good racing because you can use the whole track surface. So for BAPS, black slick straightaways, dry corners, and a little splash of water here and there kind of brings it right back. Now, Lincoln and the Grove, it seems like the Grove we get a very, track conditions vary there quite a bit. The straightaways there always seem to be, it's either it's 180 degree opposite. You get there and the straightaways are dry and slick, or you get there and everything's so wet and you just run around there wide open. I really don't know why that is. Here again, I think if you ask everybody in the pier, they're going to tell you, at the Grove you need a cushion. You need the track to get slick to a cushion where you can run against the cushion, get a little technical, put your right rear up there on some moisture, because the way that track is shaped, if it's just wet, everybody can run around there wide open. It's really effortlessly in these cars to turn a lap without taking your foot off the throttle. The way things are, and the shocks, they just turn right around there and zip right around. So kind of same thing for the Grove. You need them straightaways slick and a little bit of a cushion, which we don't ever seem to really be able to build a cushion there in the last several years. Lincoln's kind of the opposite. I feel like Lincoln, you need the way that track is shaped. The straightaways need a little more moisture. They need to carry a little more moisture. And then the turns need to get slick. The turns at Lincoln really ought to get black slick, here again, to a cushion. There's plenty of room to do slide jobs. If you've got a little bit of moisture on the straight, you can get a little run at people off the turn. The problem is at Lincoln anyway, if the straightaways are completely black slick, there's no way to really get any momentum, build any kind of, if the guy in front of you messes up, well, you're not getting on anything either. So you can't really gain any speed, build any speed. Of course, the dog's here today. So that's kind of my take on track prep. I haven't been to as many racetracks as Danny, so he's seen a lot more stuff over the years. I've seen tracks like Hagerstown. We used to go there all the time for day races, and it would be black slick, and then it would actually lay what we would call take rubber, lay rubber. And when it does that, it kind of gets faster. You go from black slick, no traction, to well, there's enough rubber put down off the tires onto the surface where it actually starts picking up speed, you're picking up traction, and you're going faster. So now let's talk about the I-55 race last weekend. The Outlaws were there Friday and Saturday. Danny went out, and then he actually trucked all the way back here to race on Sunday at BAPS. So a lot of highway time there for them guys. But so I watched it. I watched Friday night, parts of it. I missed the beginning part of it. My dirt vision was buffering or freezing up. I don't know why it does that, but it does. They had a great racing service Friday night. If you watched it, you'll know what I'm talking about. Track was smooth. I will say in Central PA, we pretty much have smooth tracks. I think all our tracks are relatively smooth. You know, once in a while, BAPS will get a bump going into the turn. And I don't know if that's from their other divisions they race there, but it's been smooth this year so far. And the Grove's kind of the same way. They'll get a bump going into the turn, but relatively speaking, we have smooth tracks, okay, which is great. These cars are going fast. We don't need any holes in the track to upset the car and tear stuff apart. So I-55, smooth track, probably as smooth as I've ever saw it. Black slick to a cushion, and not a huge cushion, kind of like a moisture line. And it created great racing, which is kind of like what I was just talking about with these other local tracks. It kind of evened everything out, all right? So, you know, yes, you need horsepower. Yes, you need to be able to go fast, but you need to have your car set up extremely well because the track's technical. It was slick all the way to the cushion, which wasn't that far off the wall. There were people pulling slide jobs, slicing and dicing. There was lap traffic. It was by far the best Peevely event that I've seen on Friday night. So hats off to them. And that's why I would say it's more important for winged sprint cars, because I know it's different for wingless. It's more important for these winged sprint cars to have a slick track to slow the car down, all right? I want you to listen to this saying, and I've said it to other people, and I actually I've heard it used elsewhere, but the faster the race cars go, and it doesn't matter what division it is, okay, but the faster you go speed-wise, the harder it is to pass. So, you know, you put everybody on an even playing field in a sense, because everybody's going fast, you know, whether the conditions dictate that or whatever the circumstances are. The faster you go, the harder it is to pass. Now, you take Peevely, for example, Friday night. Track was slicked over, and it didn't matter where the camera was pointing. There were cars passing. They were going high, going low, doing slide jobs, this, that, the next thing. And it was great. Now, Saturday night, it looked to me like they didn't do as much track prep prior to the race. Now, this is where the lines get a little blurry sometimes when you say, well, you need to have a slick track, okay? Feature time, they get going, and it became pretty apparent pretty quick that the track was wore out. In other words, there was no top left for these guys. And everybody kind of migrated to the bottom. The track cleaned off, like I talked about earlier. There was no marbles. Everybody's moving down here. Everybody's tires are hot. So then the rubber off the tires are starting to stick to the track surface. It gets abrasive. It takes rubber. It turns into a one-lane track. And that's when everybody's just playing, you know, it's a train race around the bottom. So when I talk about these, our local tracks here, and I've been to some other tracks. I'll give you one example in a second. But our local tracks, it's so important, I think, to get the track slicked over and slowed down to create good racing throughout the night. Now, if you ever stick around and watch the 358 race at Lincoln, typically speaking, once we get into normal conditions, you know, a lot of times their race kind of all migrates to the bottom. And the reason that is the track gets so wide, so slick, that it becomes the shorter way around, ends up being the faster way around, and then it gets abrasive and takes rubber too a lot of times. All right, so this is where I get a little annoyed with some of the stuff that I see going on here locally. And here's why I say this. There's so much emphasis, it appears to be so much emphasis put into track prep before the night gets started, that if we overwater the track or we put a lot of water down on the track, we don't have to do anything the rest of the night to the track. And that's probably true. I mean, if the track's wet and it's not dusty and it doesn't get wide until feature time, if it even gets wide into feature time, it's less work for us. Problem with that is, and we see it all the time, is it just ruins all the qualifying. Just ruins it. Tracks are wet, tracks are fast, very little passing. It's terrible to watch if you're a spectator. I mean, I hear them all the time. Well, nobody passed. We sat through 6 heat races, 2 divisions, 3 heat races each division. Nobody passed. Or it wasn't until the last 2 heat races the track started to widen out. Well, okay. All we got to do now is go out and pack the cushion down and send them back out. And I realized that back when my dad raced back in the early 90s, back through the 80s and even into the 90s, that really wasn't a problem. And the reason that wasn't a problem because cars weren't going as fast. The competition level the gap in competition was huge from first place to last place. Every spot in between, the cars were not as close in speed. Okay, you had guys that were running steel blocks, guys had aluminum blocks. You had guys there didn't even have 410s. At one, if you talk to my dad in the early days, 377 or 383 or whatever it was. So the competition wasn't as close. So it was easier, in a sense, I'm going to use that word lightly, easier for cars to pass because the variation in the competition throughout the field was wider. So you had guys that were definitely by far faster, that even on a wet track and a heavy track and a rough track, they could do all this stuff because they had faster cars. They had better motors. They had better this, that, whatever. 2025, that's really not the case. You can have a guy that's maybe he's off the pace a little bit, but he can maintain and win that heat race and start up front. And the reason that's disappointing to me is some of these tracks are able to take 20 minutes and do a little bit of track prep. Not a lot because the track was already dry and slick. It made for good racing early in the night, and the fans were entertained. And if you drew a bad number, you're starting 8th or 6th or something in your heat, you had the opportunity to pass. Well, not every track looks at it like that anymore. And like I said, I hear about it from the fans. I watch it. I live it. I'm on the track, and it downright sucks. Okay? It's terrible. I know my brother called a lot of flack last week because he called out some of the tracks on their track prep and or other things. But not everything you see is wrong, okay? And I just wanted to come on here and kind of share that with everybody, that's probably why the racing, I hear all the time, the racing sucks. Racing sucks. There you are. That's some of the reason why it's track prep. Now, I'll throw this in here a little bit because I spent some time with I've been to Western Pennsylvania. And there are tracks like, I'm going to throw Lernerville out there, for example. I've raced there quite a bit, a handful of years ago, maybe 10 years ago by now. I'm not even sure. I raced there on Friday nights for Skip, almost the whole season, not quite, but damn near the whole season. And you'd show up there on a Friday night, and the track would get black slick, and I guess it was the dirt, or I don't know. I don't know what it was about that particular track, that it would get black slick, top to bottom, and it would never take rubber. Maybe it's the shape of the track. I don't know. And there are other tracks like that too. Port Royal's a good one. Port Royal hardly ever gets abrasive and takes rubber. It gets black slick. Now Lernerville would, once in a while, they take an intermission and do a little farming, track prep till the top, like Baps does. Put a little water down and bring it right back for the feature. So my point is, there is ways around this, and but you gotta want to work at it a little bit. Now, I know length of show is an issue. People talk about that all the time. I'm just as guilty, but I feel as though for our area, to make the racing better, let's make racing great again. It really starts with the track surface. You got your cars show up every week, they're prepared to race, and then you got to have a track that's prepared to put on a good race. And that's my feelings about that. So by all means, comment right down here. Let me know what you think. I know this is kind of a different topic, but I've been thinking about it for a while, and I wanted to share that with you. All right, so one other thing off topic I want to share with everybody that kind of fun, right? So I watch a lot of YouTube. Obviously, you're watching this, it's on YouTube. But I discovered the one, his name's Dave. I think his name, I don't know what his last name is, Dave Portney, something like that. The One Bite Pizza guy. Everybody knows the rules. One bite, everybody knows the rules. So I'm having a lot of fun watching that. I even got Heather watching it with me sometimes. It's entertaining. I like pizza. In case you're wondering, I like pizza. Who doesn't like pizza, by the way? And so we've been watching it, and we have a good time watching it. It's entertaining. We have a hard time finding stuff to watch on regular television that's not, far out there. I'll just put it that way. So I enjoy watching it, and I would recommend checking it out. If you're like a foodie and you're into that kind of stuff, he's got some good content on there. If you like pizza. So anyway, that's my Bill's life update there. If you want to give it, put a little tag on it. So anyway, I appreciate you watching. Like I said, comment below, and I always enjoy talking to everybody too. So thanks for watching. I'm gonna get back to work. Doors are up. It's actually pretty nice today, almost 70 degrees. I'm looking at the thermometer over here. I got some more work to do, and call Dowdy's Pest Control if you got any bug problems right there. Give them a call, and that's it. See you next time.